On the next episode of World of Africa, Ethiopia's deal to leave a port in Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland has infuriated the government in Mogadishu and prompted concerns it will further destabilize the Horn of Africa region. Outrage in Kenya over the rise in femicide cases as thousands march and hold protests to call for urgent government action. And beekeepers turn away from honey and harvest venom instead, which is popular in alternative medicine. World of Africa at these times only on WION. World is one.
Hello and welcome to WION live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. Former Pakistan PM Imran Khan and his party colleague Shah Mahmood Qureshi received 10-year sentence in the Cypher case. The two leaders were accused of revealing the nation's official secrets. The United States vows to respond to the targeting of US troops at its base on the Jordan-Syria border. The White House says it is not looking for a war with Iran or seeking to escalate the tensions in West Asia. French farmers protest for the second day in the capital They are preparing to encircle Paris with tractors and hay bales. They're demanding just prices and loosened regulations. Dense fog disrupts travel across northern India. Several trains cancelled and many flights delayed, leading to travel chaos. The Met Department has issued a cold alert for the region, with heavy rain expected in the coming days. Virgil van Dijk casts doubts over his future at Liverpool after Jurgen Klopp announced his surprise departure. The Dutchman says he doesn't know if he will be part of the post-Klopp era.
Okay, come on boys, let's go. Start nice and easy, come on!
The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, which is considered to be a lifeline for 2 million people in the besieged enclave, has suffered funding cuts after several of its staff were accused of involvement in the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. Now, New Zealand has joined the list of countries that have suspended their funding to the UN agency. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon says the country has paused the funding until the allegations are investigated. The crisis over UNRWA funding continues as several key donor countries to the UN agency refuse to review their decision. At least 11 countries had earlier said they would halt funding. The United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, Japan and Germany are among the other countries to have already suspended funding to the UNRWA. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it's imperative that UNRWA hold people accountable and that it reviews its procedures. Following the allegations, the UN chief met with the head of internal UN investigations to ensure that an inquiry into Israeli accusations against their staff is being done swiftly and efficiently as possible. Observers and aid workers said the move by the donors would exacerbate hunger. Even before the conflict, the UNRWA was struggling to secure funding and warned that it was on the verge of collapse. Many of its 13,000 staff members are refugees themselves. At least 150 have been killed since the Israel-Hamas conflict began. The halt in funding comes as a blow for the agency, as the UNRWA that was set up to help refugees of war at Israel's founding in 1948. The agency extends a range of services, including education, health and aid to them in Gaza, the West Bank, Jordan, Syria and Lebanon. Well, of course, the plight of refugees in Gaza has been one of the key scenes in this war that has caused such distress to the worldwide community. Of course, coming after the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th, Israel retaliating with a bombardment of Gaza. The siege of Gaza continues for the last few months. And I'm pleased to say that we're now joined by our correspondent, Jodie Cohen, joining us live from Rwanda. And Jodie, many thanks for joining us. What can you tell us about this latest on the suspension of funding for the UNRWA and how much it might impact aid getting into Gaza?
Hi, Oliver. Yes, so there's a growing list of countries who have suspended their funding to UNRWA. This is reportedly following evidence that at least a dozen UNRWA employees participated in the 7th of October kidnappings and massacre of Israelis, and that 10% reportedly of UNRWA employees and 23% of UNRWA's male staff are reportedly operatives of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which we know have been recognised as terror groups by several countries. countries. And more allegations are said to be being presented today to US Congress, including that an official UNRWA schools channel involving 3,000 teachers reportedly celebrated the 7th of October and discussed how UNRWA schools could do more to teach others to become martyrs. The allegations also say that some UNRWA employees were holding hostages in their homes. That's according to some of the released hostages. That UNRWA resources have been used to supply Hamas tunnels, and that UNRWA civilian sites have been used to store Hamas weapons. Now, Mark Regev, Israel's spokesperson, has said that it's not just a few bad apples. He suggested that it's institutional ties between Hamas and UNRWA. And some commentators are now calling for an independent investigation not run by UNRWA. But in terms of aid, Germany's foreign minister has said that there are other routes to get money to Gaza, and UN Watch has said that there are other UN agencies who could deliver the aid. But US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that he believes that there's no one else that can play this role in the near term, and has urged UNRWA to carry out a thorough investigation as soon as possible.
We've heard from the Secretary of State Blinken. He's been talking about this volatile situation across West Asia. Tell us about the latest on talks for a new hostage release deal and a pause, of course, in the fighting.
Yes, so Antony Blinken said that, quote, the world has not seen such a situation in the Middle East since 1973. Now, 1973 was the Yom Kippur War, when a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria attacked Israel. We know that Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said that Israel is now defending itself on 7 fronts. And as an example, in the latest, Israel has said that it killed 3 Hamas terrorists who are hiding, they said, in a hospital in Jenin, and planning to carry out another 7th of October style attack against Israelis. We also know that the US forces are being attacked in Iraq and Jordan from Iranian-backed groups, and Blinken has said that the US will respond. Meanwhile, the talks are reportedly ongoing about the Israel-Hamas war. Israel, in the latest we've heard, has agreed to a new hostage release proposal with pauses in the fighting and for the release of the remaining 136 hostages being held in Gaza. Hamas has so far not accepted that proposal, but we are hearing that the talks are expected to continue.
Jodie Cohen joining us live as ever from Rwanda. Many thanks for your insight. The UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron will be travelling to Oman today, where he seeks to secure peace and stability in the Red Sea. The UK Foreign Office says that Cameron will also call for a de-escalation of tensions in West Asia. This is his 4th visit to the region, and Cameron will be meeting his Omani counterpart, Badir Abu Saidi. His talks will be heavily focused on the Houthi attacks on international maritime lines in the Red Sea, in addition to outlining the UK's efforts to prevent the Houthis from attacking ships in the Red Sea. Cameron will reaffirm the country's commitment to sending supplies to Yemen. On his last trip, Cameron visited Israel, where he met the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, along with other top officials in the West Bank. He also visited Qatar to discuss the Gaza war. Back then, the British Foreign Secretary stressed for the need for a pause in the fighting to secure the release of hostages and to also make sure this war stops. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has secured a crucial victory in the upper house of Parliament. This for his legislation to revive a plan aimed at relocating asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Rwanda plan involves sending asylum seekers arriving on England's southern coast in inflatable boats to live in Rwanda. After more than 6 hours of heated debate on Monday, unelected members of the House of Lords, primarily former politicians and government officials, rejected an amendment that sought to quash the legislation. This with a decisive vote of 206 in favour and 84 against. The legislation then progressed through its second reading without a formal vote, paving the way for days of detailed scrutiny. Well, within the Lords, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, the spiritual leader of the global Anglican community, issued a caution. He said that the government was leading the nation down a damaging path. The Archbishop also expressed concern about the potential harm to the country's reputation. Despite widespread condemnation of the plan, the Labour Party chose not to oppose the legislation at this stage. This time, they feared a breach of the constitutional roles by rejecting a bill approved by the elected House of Commons. Instead, their focus was on scrutinising the legislation. Moreover, debates and votes on amendments are anticipated next month. The Lords are expected to exert their influence to modify the legislation during later stages of the parliamentary process. In the midst of his Conservative Party trailing in the opinion polls ahead of a potential election later this year, Sunak has heavily invested political capital in the Rwanda policy. This was done with an aim to fulfil his promise to stop the boats. Over 1,000 asylum seekers have arrived in Britain via small boats this year, despite Britain having already paid Rwanda approximately $305 million to accommodate asylum seekers. Logistical challenges and legal issues have prevented the actual implementation of the relocation plan.
The boat?
Well, for more on this, we're now being joined by Julia Chapman from London. Julia, a significant day and a step forward for Rishi Sunak's Rwanda plan. How significant is yesterday's vote in the Lords?
Well, undoubtedly it is a win for Rishi Sunak, but not perhaps an unexpected one. This was an early stage of the scrutiny of this bill in the House of Lords, the UK's upper house of Parliament. As you say, this is an unelected body, and their role really is to look in detail at the legislation that has already been approved by the lower house, the House of Commons, and look at it very carefully before potentially sending it back to the Commons to make some more amendments. But we saw it pass its first hurdle on Monday night. Quite overwhelming support, although the opposition Labour Party said the reason it was doing that and backing this bill, which it didn't do in the Commons, was that this was something that needed to be done by the elected members of Parliament, saying it wasn't the Lords' role to stop this bill. It was simply to scrutinise it and make it better. So that is what we are likely to see in the weeks to come. At the next stage, we're expecting to see the peers in the House of Lords looking very closely at this bill and examining what it should go forward with and what it should be left out of. We saw some very impassioned speeches by a number of peers on Monday, including, as you say, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, saying this was damaging to the United Kingdom, that people who are seeking asylum in this country deserve respect, something he seemed to imply was not being offered by the plan to deport them to Rwanda for their asylum claims to be processed there. But as you say, Rishi Sunak has very much staked his reputation on this bill going forward. It could still get bogged down in the House of Lords in the weeks to come. The Prime Minister says he wants to see planes taking off for Rwanda in the spring ahead of an expected general election later this year. It would be seen by his Conservative Party as a big political win if he can make that happen. So certainly it could get bogged down and slowed down, but ultimately it is now expected to pass in some form. It's just a matter of how much it will need to change in order to meet the approval ultimately of the House of Lords.
Some twists and turns to come, I think. Many thanks, Julia Chapman, joining us live from London. Agrarian protests in France have started to spill over into the rest of Europe. In the latest, farmers in Belgium have now parked their tractors mere stone's throw away from the European Parliament, spooking leaders all over the continent. French farmers on Monday barricaded a highway leading into Paris with bales of hay. The arterial transit was choked again in the wake of another day of blockades that saw farmers clog major roads leading into Paris. The farmers seek to pressure the state for relief from inflation, for higher tariffs on imports, for better income and working conditions. In Longviers, southwest of France, demonstrating farmers used tractors and trailers to block both lanes of the A10 highway.
We're waiting. We have decided to block the A1 highway here for new decisions of the Prime Minister. We're putting him under a bit of pressure, hoping that this blockade will encourage him to take faster decisions that are favourable to us.
As claimed by Prisca Thévenot, spokesperson for the French government, amended measures to pacify the farmers are on track to be announced later today. France's agrarian protests follow similar action in neighbouring European nations, including demonstrations in Germany and Poland. In southern Belgium, farmers parked tractors close to the EU Parliament on Monday. Close to 30 to 40 tractors blocked off the E19 road south of Brussels. Many of the farmers have chosen to spend the night either in their vehicles or around a bonfire with fellow demonstrators. This was but one of many blockades in the French-speaking region of Wallonia. Tractors also clogged the Square de Meuse, with protesters blaring horns 3 blocks from the EU Parliament. Organisers have warned EU officials that the Monday blockade was a foretaste of the disruptions planned for the EU summit scheduled for this Thursday. In Germany, on the other hand, the GDL train drivers union has called off its industrial action prematurely as negotiations with rail operator Deutsche Bahn resumes. The 4th railway strike, the longest round of industrial action in a months-long dispute over income and work hours, was initiated in the early hours of Wednesday last week, with a plan to conclude the demonstration late Monday evening. According to union representatives, the striking rail workers and Deutsche Bahn have agreed to privately negotiate over the next 5 weeks, with no strikes planned until the first week of March. The parties have claimed the talks will be strictly confidential and no public announcements will be made until they have concluded.
We had confidential discussions at the end of last week, which led to the resumption of wage negotiations